650 BC, which must have been based on acquaintance with Egyptian works that could be studied only on the spot. We know that small colonies of Greeks existed in Egypt at the time, but why, we wonder, did Greece suddenly develop a taste for monumentality? And how did her artists acquire so quickly the Egyptian mastery of stone carving? Slide, please. Let us consider two very early Greek statues, a female figure of about 650 to 625 BC, and a nude youth of about 600 BC, and compare them with their Egyptian predecessors. The similarities are certainly striking. We note the block-conscious, cubic character of the statues, the slim, broad-shouldered silhouette of the male figures, the position of their arms, their clenched fists. Slide, please. The formalized wig treatment of the hair, the close-fitting garment of the female figures, and her raised arm are further points of resemblance. Judged by Egyptian standards, the archaic statue seems somewhat primitive, rigid, oversimplified, awkward, less close to nature. Whereas the Egyptian sculptor allows the legs and hips of the female figure to press through the skirt, the Greek shows a solid, undifferentiated mass from which only the toes protrude. Slide, please. But the Greek statues also have virtues of their own. First of all, they are the truly freestanding, the earliest large stone images of the human form in the entire history of art of which this can be said. Slide, please. He separates the arms from the torso and the legs from each other, unless they are cased in a skirt, and goes to great lengths to cut away every bit of the dead material. Apparently, it is one of the greatest importance to him that a statue consists only of stone that has representational meaning within an organic whole. The stone must be transformed. This is not a question of technique, but of artistic intention. Slide, please. Whom do they represent? We call the female statues by the general name of Kore, or maiden. The male ones by that of Koros, or youth. Absolutely non-committal terms. These were possibly votive offerings. Others were placed on graves. Yet they can be viewed as representations of the deceased only in the broadest sense. Slide, please. They are neither gods nor men, but something in between. An ideal of physical perfection and vitality shared by mortal and immortal alike. Slide, please. There are numerous statues from the middle years of the 6th century, such as the magnificent calf bearer, carved around 570 BC. A votive figure representing the donor with the sacrificial animal he is offering to Athena. Needless to say, it is not a portrait any more than the other statues that we have seen are, but it shows a type. The beard indicates a man of mature years. The calf bearer originally had the Koros standing pose. The legs are badly damaged though, and the body conforms to the Koros ideal of physical perfection. Its vigorous, compact forms are emphasized rather than obscured by the thin cloak which fits them like a second skin, detaching itself only momentarily at the elbows. The face, effectively framed by the soft curve of the animal, no longer has the mask-like quality of the early Koros. The features have, as it were, caught up with the rest of the body in that they too are permitted a gesture, a movement expressive of life. The lips are drawn up in a smile. This archaic smile occurs throughout 6th century Greek sculpture. Only after 500 BC does it gradually fade out. One of the most famous instances of it is the wonderful rampant head, slide please, which probably belonged to the body of a horseman. Slightly later than the calf-bearer, it shows the black figured phase of archaic sculpture at its highest state of refinement. Hair and beard have the appearance of richly textured beaded embroidery that sets off the subtly accented planes of the face. Slide, please. The Kore type is somewhat more variable than that of the Koros, although it follows the same pattern of development. A clothed figure, by definition, it poses a different problem: how to relate body and drapery. Thus, the impressive statue of Hera, carved about the same time as the calf-bearer, does not represent a more evolved stage, but an alternative approach to the same basic task. She was found in the Temple of Hera on the island of Samos, and may well have been an image of the goddess because of her great size as well as her extraordinary dignity. Slide, please. The Hera seems like a column come to life. Instead of clear-cut accents such as the nipped-in waist, we find here a smooth, continuous flow of lines uniting limbs and body. Yet the majestic effect of the statue depends not so much on its abstract quality as on the way the abstract form blossoms forth into the swelling softness of a living body. The great upward sweep of the lower third of the figure gradually subdivides to reveal several separate layers of garments. As it encounters the protruding shapes of arms, hips, and torso. Slide, please. This Kore was carved a full century later. She too is block-like rather than columnar, with a strongly accented waist. The simplicity of her garments, however, is new and sophisticated. The heavy cloth forms a distinct separate layer over the body, covering but not concealing the solidly rounded shapes beneath. And the left hand, which originally was extended forward, proffering a votive gift of some sort, must have given the statue a spatial quality quite beyond the earlier two figures we have discussed. Slide, please. Equally new is the more organic treatment of the hair, which falls over the shoulders in soft, curly strands, as compared with the massive, rigid wig that we have seen before. Slide, please. Our final Kore, about a decade later, has none of the severity of the last figure. Though both were found on the Acropolis of Athens. Slide, please. The garments still loop around the body in soft diagonal curves, but the play of richly differentiated folds, pleats, and textures have almost become an end in itself. Color must have played a particularly important role in such works, and we are fortunate that so much of it has survived on our example. Slide, please. When the Greeks began to build their temples in stone, they also fell heir to the age-old tradition of architectural sculpture. The sculpture is confined to a zone that is framed by structural members, but is itself structurally empty. The triangle between the horizontal ceiling and the sloping sides of the roof, this area called the pediment, need not be filled in at all except to protect the wooden rafters behind it against moisture. It demands not a wall, but merely a thin screen, and it is against this screen that the pedimental sculpture is displayed. Slide, please. Aside from the pediment, there were not many places that the Greeks deemed suitable for architectural sculpture. They might put freestanding figures, often of terracotta, above the ends in the center of the pediment to break the severity of its outline. Slide, please. The treasury erected at Delphi shortly before 525 BC by the inhabitants of the Ionia island of Sipnos Although the building itself is no longer standing, it has been convincingly reconstructed on the basis of the preserved fragments. Of its lavish sculptural decor, the most impressive part is the splendid frieze. The detail shows part of the battle of the Greek gods against the giants. The Greek sculptor used the projecting ledge at the bottom of the frieze as a stage on which he can place his figures in depth. Slide, please. Among the most impressive are the fallen warrior from the left-hand corner and the kneeling Heracles who once held a bronze bow. Both are lean, muscular figures whose bodies seem marvelously functional and organic. That in itself, however, does not explain their great beauty, much as we may admire the artist's command of the human form in action. What really moves us is their nobility of spirit, whether in the agony of dying or in the act of killing. Slide, please. These men, we sense, are suffering or carrying out what fate has decreed with tremendous dignity and resolve. And this communicates itself to us in the very feel of the magnificently firm shapes of which they are composed. Slide, please. Clear the machine. For our review, I would like everybody to be aware of how interrelated the different cultures that we have studied so far this semester are to each other. Notably, because of their close proximity geographically, the influences of the earlier styles influenced the later styles, although the philosophies were entirely different. The type of building and construction carries down through its growth period from culture to culture, applied for different uses. From the early tombs and temples, the massive building related in detail to nature objects of the Egyptians, then were related to the understanding of construction methods to the Mesopotamians, the Aegeans, and the Greeks. Slide, please. In the sculpture, we have talked about the similarity of form of the monumental style of Egyptian sculpture influencing the monumental style of Greek sculpture. Whereas the Egyptians kept their forms close within the block with very little movement, the Greeks later freed the figure from all the extraneous stone that was left around the parts of the body. Slide, please. Egyptian wall painting had a strong linear effect. It was all in flat pattern against a flat background, narrative in its story, filling in the life of the pharaoh or the person who is the subject of the mural. Strong symbolism and hieroglyphic characters that tell the story of the pharaoh. Slide, please. The Mesopotamian culture is divided into three areas: the Sumerians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. With the Babylonians, we have a strong building of monumental sort of step pyramid temples that were faced with glazed bricks that carried figures of the animals and the winged gods sort of as protectors to the city. Slide, please. And in the Assyrians, the palace relief carvings that are more stories of the conquest of the kings and their braveries. Slide, please. Then in the culture that precedes the Greek culture, sort of a stepping stone into art of the Western world, really, are the Aegean cultures, the islands off the mainland of Greece. They were also divided into three areas: the Cycladic, the Minoan, and the Mycenaean. In these, the Cycladic, one of the best preserved figures of their culture are the little idols, the burial figures that are very geometric in shape, mostly the female figure, probably a representation of the fertility goddess, with arms crossed and very geometric and wedge-like in shape. Slide, please. And the other aspect of Aegean art are the very sort of flowing, curvilinear line drawings that align the palace that we now have only in fragments, but sort of a spontaneity, a gaiety to their drawings, colored in sort of soft, transparent washes with earth pigments. They're not as rigid as the Egyptian paintings, although they are still creating no space, but have the flat pattern in the background. But the line quality, very curvy, very light, almost defying gravity, depicting all sorts of animal and plant life.
And also these were done in the palaces at Minos. The other type of architecture was the beehive tomb, which massive stone blocks were built in this elliptical shape with the huge stone lintel across the doorway and the triangular pediment above it, usually filled with some form of sculpture. In the archaic Greek sculpture, you have the beginnings of the free form style of the figure. You have the archaic face, the embryonic eyes sort of bulging, and the archaic smile that denoted life within the figure. In this one you had the Koros, which was the freestanding nude male figure with weight equally placed on both legs. And in the pediment sculpture, the early of the scenes of battle with the dying soldiers. Clear the machine, please.
May I have your attention, please? This tape is on Greek classical sculpture. Put in the first slide, please. Among the statues excavated from the debris the Persians had left behind on the Acropolis, there is one Koros that stands apart from the rest. It must have been carved very shortly before the fateful year of 480 BC. This remarkable work, which some have attributed to the Athenian sculptor Critios, and which therefore has become known as the Critios boy. He differs subtly but importantly from the archaic Koros figures we have discussed before. It is the first statue we know that stands in the full sense of the word. Of course, the earlier figures also stand, but only in the sense they are in an upright position and are not reclining, sitting, kneeling, or running. Their stance is really an arrested walk, with the weight of the body resting evenly on both legs. The Critios boy, too, has one leg placed forward, yet we never doubt for an instant that he is standing still. Why this is so becomes evident when we compare the left and the right half of his body, for we then discover that the strict symmetry of the archaic Koros has now given way to a calculated non-symmetry. The knee of the forward leg is lower than the other. The right hip is thrust down and inward, the left hip up and outward. And if we trace the axis of the body, we realize that it is not a straight vertical line, but a faint S-like curve, or really to be exact, a reversed S curve. Taken all together, all these small departures from symmetry tell us that the weight of the body rests mainly on the left leg, and that the right leg plays the role of an elastic prop or buttress to make sure that the body keeps its balance. The Critios boy then not only stands, he stands at ease, and the artist has masterfully observed the balanced non-symmetry of this relaxed, natural stance. To describe it, we use the Italian word contrapposto, or counterpoise. And we will use that term frequently to describe this balancing of the human figure. Only by learning how to represent the body at rest could the Greek sculptor gain the freedom to show it in motion. we sense for the first time not only a new repose, but an animation of the body structure that evokes the experience we have of our own body. Life now suffuses the entire figure, hence the archaic smile, or the sign of life, is no longer needed. It has given way to a serious, pensive expression characteristic of the early phase of classical sculpture, or as it is often called, the severe style. Slide, please. The new articulation of the body that appears in the Critios boy was to reach its full development within half a century in the mature classical style of the Periclean era. The most famous choral statue of that time, the Spear Bearer by Polyclitus, Polyclitus, is known to us through Roman copies whose hard, dry forms convey little of the beauty of the original. Still, it makes an instructive comparison. The counterpoise, with the engaged leg in the forward position, has now become more emphatic. The differentiation between the left and the right halves of the body can be seen in every muscle, and the turn of the head, barely hinted at in the Critios boy, is equally pronounced. This studied poise, the precise if over-explicit anatomical detail, and above all the harmonious proportions of the figure, make the spear bearer renowned as the standard embodiment of the classical ideal of human beauty. Slide, please. But let us return to the severe style, or as we might call it, the transition period between archaic and classical sculpture. The style is used to describe the character of Greek sculpture between the years 480 and 450 BC. And it becomes clear to us as we look at the splendid charioteer from Delphi, the earliest surviving large bronze statue in Greek art. It must have been made about a decade later than the Critios boy as a votive offering after a race. The young victor originally stood on a chariot drawn by 4 horses. Despite the long, heavy garment, we sense a hint of this counterpoise in the body. The feet are carefully differentiated so as to inform us that the left leg is the engaged one, and the shoulders and head turn slightly to the right. Slide, please. The garment is severely simple, yet compared with archaic drapery, the fold seems softer and more pliable. We feel, probably for the first time in the history of sculpture, that they reflect the behavior of real cloth. Not only the body, but the drapery too has been transformed by a new understanding of functional relationships. Slide, please. Every fold is shaped by the forces which act upon it, the downward pull of gravity, the shape of the body underneath, and the belts or straps that constrict its flow. Slide, please. The face has a somewhat pensive, faraway look that we saw in the Critios boy, but the color inlay of the eyes, fortunately preserved in this instance, as well as the slightly parted lips and the added decorative detailing of the copper eyelashes, give it a more animated expression. Slide, please. The bearing of the entire figure conveys the solemnity of the event commemorated. For chariot races and similar contests at that time were competitions for divine favor, not sporting events in the modern sense. Slide, please. The greatest sculptural ensemble of the severe style is the parapediment of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, carved about 460 BC. In the west pediment, we see the Apollo who forms the center of the composition. His commanding figure is part of the drama, and yet above it, the outstretched arms, the right arm, and the strong turn of the head show his active intervention. He wills the victory, but as befits a god, does not physically help to achieve it. Nevertheless, there is a tenseness, a gathering of forces in this powerful body that make its outward calm doubly impressive. The forms themselves are massive and simple, with soft contours and undulating, continuous surfaces. Another achievement of the severe style is the passionate struggle expressed not only through action and gesture, but through the emotions mirrored in the faces. Slide, please. Strenuous action had already been explored in pedimental sculpture of the late Archaic period. Such figures, however, although technically carved in the round, are not freestanding. They represent rather a kind of super relief, since they are designed to be seen against the background and from one direction only. Slide, please. To infuse the same freedom of movement into genuinely freestanding statues was a far greater challenge. Not only did it run counter to an age-old tradition that denied mobility to these figures, but the unfreezing had to be done in such a way as to safeguard their all-around balance and self-sufficiency. The problem could not really be tackled until the concept of this counterpoise that we have mentioned had been established. But once this was done, the solution no longer presented serious difficulties. Large freestanding statues in motion are the most important achievement of the severe style. Slide, please. The finest figure of this kind was recovered from the sea near the coast of Greece some 30 years ago. A magnificent nude bronze of Poseidon, or possibly Zeus, almost 7 feet tall, in the act of hurtling his trident, or, in the case if it turns out to be a Zeus, his thunderbolt. Slide, please. The pose is that of an athlete, yet it does not strike us as the arrested phase of a continuous succession of movements, but as an awe-inspiring gesture that reveals the power of the god. Slide, please. Hurling a weapon is a divine attribute here, rather than a specific performance aimed at a particular adversary. Slide, please. Some years after the Poseidon, about 450 BC, Myron created his famous bronze statue of the discus thrower, which came to enjoy a reputation comparable to that of the spear bearer. Slide, please. Like the latter, it is known to us only from Roman copies. Here the problem of how to condense a sequence of movements into a single pose without freezing it is a very much more complex one, involving a violent twist of the torso in order to bring the action of the arms into the same plane as the action of the legs. We wonder whether the copy does not make the design seem harsher and less poised than it was in the original. Slide, please. The discus thrower brings us to the threshold of the second half of the century, the era of the mature classical style. The conquest of movement in the freestanding statue now exerted a liberating influence on pedimental sculpture as well, endowing it with a new spaciousness, fluidity, and balance. The dying Niobe, a work of the 440 BC, was carved for the pediment of a Doric temple, but is so richly three-dimensional, so self-contained, that we hardly suspect her original context. Niobe, according to the legend, had humiliated the